Hello, everybody. Looks like we don't have a quorum yet. So we'll probably just hang in there for 5 or so more minutes and see people as people join. All right, it looks like we have a quorum now. So I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order at 3:01 p.m. Let's see. The first thing on the agenda. Well, first I'll just let everyone know who's here. James Walters here, Britt Arnson's here, Jesse Tuberty's here, Jean is here, and Jessica is here in attendance. And we need to approve the minutes from not August, but July. And so that's going to be one of the first things that we need to do. Somebody else joined. Let me just take a quick look. Second on a board member. Okay. So if everyone on the board has had time to review the minutes from July's meeting, because we did not meet in August, I just need a motion from someone to approve the minutes from July.
A motion to approve the minutes from July.
Thank you, Jessica. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Aye. Okay, great. All right. So on the screen are instructions for folks who might want to be joining us for public comment. So basically the websites are shown, www.missoulapublicmeetings.com. To raise your hand during this, you can, while in the webinar in Zoom, click participants. You can raise or lower your hand. You can, on an iPhone, while in Zoom, click more, and that will allow you to raise your or lower your hand. For dial-in participants, while in the webinar in Zoom, you can press *9 to raise your hand and *9 again to lower your hand. For voicemail, you may call 406-552-6012, or you may send an email to council@ci.missoula.mt.us. Okay, so we've approved the minutes. Let me see if we have folks joining us from the general public. It looks like we have one person who called in, and I'm going to unmute you and allow you to give any public comment that you would like.
It's actually me. I'm having some technical difficulties, so I'm just calling in on my phone.
Oh, okay. All right. So this is Britt. I just wanted to be sure we didn't have someone out there who's waiting. So that's great. Okay, Britt, thanks for being here.
Is Lisa a member of the public?
Lisa Hudak, I may not be saying this correctly, is listed as a panelist, and I thought she was with the city. So if I'm wrong,
MCAT for recording.
Ah, okay. Thanks,
Yeah.
Bella.
Of course.
okay. So it looks like we know who everybody is. So we don't have any general public comments. I'm going to start off the general board comments by just saying, like, it's good to see you guys. Happy August and summer. I hope you all are well. And I drove by 3rd Street and the rapid flashing beacon crosswalk for Hawthorne School is in and is amazing. And I rode on the Missoula Avenue Greenway bi-directional bike lane, and it's really fun to see what the things we talk about changing in the city. And so I find that to be very inspiring. I would also just like to give Ben a heads up that I would love to have an update on our bike-friendly city status when you give your comments. Anyone else? I'll check to see if we have hands up. Jean, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, is this the time for board member comments, I'm assuming? Got it, okay. Yeah, I just want to give a heads up to board members. I'm going to be submitting a letter for the board, recommending that the board review the letter. And it's basically sent to our agencies, such as Ben's office, Missoula in Motion, the long-range planning thing, David Gray's thing, basically looking over the things that we're responsible for. And I've mentioned this before, about a year or two before, and I never really followed up on it very well, so I apologize. That one of the things we are charged with essentially is involving aspects of education and giving advisements on that. And that, of course, the city staff, I don't have the part of our constitution, the actual number written down, it's in the letter, are to give us information so that we can fulfill our duties in this regard. And I believe I have never seen really much of any kind of a package of information given to the board regarding educational aspects in terms of the content or the modality. We get things from Public Works in terms of where we might put a bike way in, bike path, cycle track, bump outs for pedestrians for safer crossing, rapid flashing beacons, etc. We give our input on that. We haven't been given this the same kind of information in what I would refer to as soft infrastructure, which helps us get information out to bicyclists as to the best practices to use when they're riding or driving their bikes, rather, to make the best use of that infrastructure and avoid little pitfalls that even infrastructure such as bike lanes can't eliminate. So anyhow, I'm going to be sending that letter out for people on the board to review and hopefully have a discussion. If not, what's today? September, October. If not October, November, something I think we can sink our teeth into. I'm really proud that we've done a lot in terms of providing deliverables, something to come up with and say, this is what we're aiming for. I think we've fallen off of that a little bit recently, and I'd like to see us be a little proactive in this area and get some more cooperation from the city agencies than I believe we've had in the past. So just a heads up, I'll be sending that out. It's fairly short, maybe 400 words. And hopefully everybody will look over it. Don't respond to me, that goes against open meeting laws, but please take notes and come prepared to discuss, hopefully.
Thanks, Jean. We look forward to seeing your letter. Appreciate that. Let me see if anyone else has their hands up. Doesn't look like anybody does. So we're going to move on because the agenda is pretty full. The very next thing on the agenda is discussion about the Bike and Pedestrian Program with Ben Weiss.
And I'm going to let Aaron and talk about the Higgins corridor plan, and then Charlie is here to talk about the tip. I'd like them to go first, just in honor of their time.
Sure, that sounds great.
Is there an order? Is the Higgins the next on the agenda then? Okay.
Yep.
Well, I guess I can give kind of a brief update on Higgins. We're still relatively early in the process, but we did conduct our first round of public engagement at the end of July and through August. So just sort of as, I mean, let me back up and give a reminder of what the Higgins project is first. We're doing a corridor plan, so looking at all aspects of the right-of-way and transportation elements for Higgins from Brooks to Broadway. This project came out of a lot of work that's happened over the last 3 or 4 years and continues to happen, such as the construction of the Higgins Bridge, where we have designed and are building really much higher quality bike and ped facilities, separated space outside of the travel lanes. And we're already starting to see a substantial increase in pedestrian and also I think bicycle traffic due to even just having half of that bridge open. So that's a really exciting change for the corridor that's going to really improve it. But it doesn't necessarily address the issues on the north or particularly the south side of the bridge, where you transition from the bridge's protected facility into a bike lane and then quickly into essentially shared space. And so you create a lot of conflict there. We also did a lot of work looking at some work looking at the hip strip and Higgins as a whole in the downtown master plan. And there were some recommendations to continue that work and do more detailed analysis and come up with a design that really works for creating a multimodal facility that's safe for all modes, that really considers the context of Higgins as the center of Missoula and sort of as a destination of its own, not necessarily just an arterial street that's moving people through as quickly and efficiently in vehicles as possible. And so the downtown master plan had some suggestions of what we could do or different ways we might look at the corridor, but didn't land on an official, this is what we should do and this is how we should do it. So out of all of that work, we realized that now is a good time, or as good a time as any, to really look comprehensively at that remaining section of Higgins from Broadway to Brooks and how we can accommodate all of that within the right of way and look at things like parking and access. So how are people circulating around Higgins, not just up and down the corridor, looking at safety issues, looking at trying to understand how businesses and commuters and neighbors and everyone uses the corridor and try to come up with a design that better fits all of those uses. The other kind of final piece related to Higgins is work we've been doing on the Brooks corridor, BRT and transit-oriented design through the Midtown. And related to that, Mountain Line's long-term vision for transit in terms of shifting some routes around once we have adequate facilities and creating a sort of a core 15-minute bus service on Russell and then on Higgins, sort of as the right spacing for providing access to all the neighborhoods in a way that's efficient and works within our projected budgets and capacity for transit to serve. So there's an interest in potentially converting Higgins into a 15-minute route that goes from Brooks to Higgins and then into downtown. And so part of this study is really looking closely at how do we accommodate higher frequency, high quality transit to connect downtown to Midtown and then the south end of town. So a lot of work that's happened and giving us a lot of information about Higgins. And so we kicked off this project back in June, I believe. We've had one steering committee meeting to talk just about goals and how we might evaluate the success of this project. As I mentioned, we started our public outreach back in the end of July. We had a number of public events where we went to Saturday market, out to lunch, downtown tonight, talk to people directly who were coming downtown or in downtown already. we had a number of stakeholder meetings. So we went out and met with individual businesses, some small groups of business and property owners, and then went door to door to talk to all the rest that we hadn't met with in some other capacity, just to make sure that there's good awareness and that we, anyone who might have an interest in participating and has thoughts on Higgins can provide that to us before we get going on actually designing the alternatives. So we collected a ton of info on the project. I don't know the exact stats on the website. We've had several hundred people, I think, engage, and lots of comments and notes on virtual and in-person maps. And then I think we met with or talked to over 200 people in person between all those various events. It was, I think, very successful in terms of the interest that we heard from people. They were coming up in groups to talk to us about Higgins. And so I think there's a real interest in doing something, and maybe not full agreement on what that something is, but just a general excitement that we can try to tackle what's there and make it better for all the users. It's worth pointing out that we heard, some stuff that was not necessarily surprising from people, that conflict between cyclists and pedestrians and vehicles in the hip strip is something that I think everyone is concerned about. Whether you're trying to get through the corridor or drivers having to merge with cyclists and not having a lot of predictability, and that causes sort of everyone to get frustrated and create unsafe situations that no one wants to encounter. And so that is something that we heard over and over again from people. We heard a lot. So I think maybe not surprisingly, but I don't know that I was expecting to hear so much about people even driving in the corridor or business owners' concerns about the circulation, ability to turn left during travel times. It's currently not allowed. That makes it hard to get to businesses or get to parking garages or just get through the corridor. Again, lack of predictability. People are still making that turn, but people aren't necessarily expecting it because there's supposed to be a prohibition, and then people are behaving in a more erratic and unsafe way. And so that left turn prohibition and just sort of circulation and people trying to get to their destinations was something we heard a lot. We also heard a lot about parking, and some of it, again, predictable, that people have an interest, in business owners in particular want there to be enough parking so that you can get to or from the hip strip and have locations to park. But not everyone thought that we had to sacrifice every other opportunity just to preserve some parking on Higgins. I think there was just a concern on how we do that, and how do we, if we don't have parking on Higgins, how do we fill that need and make sure that businesses don't feel like people can't get to them? Because there's something about knowing that there could be a parking space in front of a business that really gets people to go there. And then, if they don't see it, they go around the block or find a space. But something to think about. And then there was a lot of interesting input on some of the challenges in terms of turnover versus availability and hourly versus long-term parking, that there's a lot of different ways you can approach parking and how you might provide that, whether it's for employees or whether it's for customers or students at the high school, or commuters who are going downtown and are parking in the hip strip and then walking across the bridge. And so we probably won't address all of that in our corridor study, but it's really interesting to think about how do we approach parking, because it's not a universal, parking has one issue and, one set of solutions, that there are different kinds of solutions depending on the outcome we want for that area. And so I think that's going to be something that we can dive into a little bit deeper and at least have in the back of our minds when we start thinking about what designs we're looking at for the corridor. And then we had some really good conversations about transit and what that means in terms of number of bus stops, which I don't know that we have fully ironed out yet, but just there's a look at how many bus stops do you have? What does that mean for how quickly you can get transit through the corridor and maintain those headways for a 15-minute service? And anything you do that impacts traffic also impacts transit unless you have dedicated facilities. And so that's another piece that we're going to have to, it's a lot of competing demands for the right of way on Higgins, which is not that wide and can't do all of it as well as we would like for every mode. So there's some trade-offs there that we're going to have to consider and hopefully our alternatives will help illustrate what some of those trade-offs are. So we've gotten to the point now where we've shut down some of the public comment collection through the website on Engage Missoula. Not all of it. We're still leaving up our idea boards, and we'll continue to put more information out there as we go. But we've started developing some typical sections for alternatives and working to refine those, which we'll take first to our steering committee and have them sort of continue to help us refine and develop those concepts so that they're in a good spot that we can generally all, at least agree that these are the right alternatives to be weighing against each other. And then we'll bring those back out to the public, likely sometime in October or early November. So continuing to do good work. There's not necessarily a lot of updates right now on what we are actually designing because we're just not there yet. But we hope to have that, I think, either by the October or November Bike Ped board meeting. We should have those ready for your review and comments. And then from there, we'll be revising those into a final recommended alternative sometime through the winter and have that ready for more public feedback in February or March, hoping to get this done reasonably soon in anticipation of sort of an influx of federal funding and other sources and wanting to get this project not just designed, but move into construction or design and construction as quickly as possible. That we don't want to have the bridge open too long before we are really getting something else on the ground that will help create a cohesive corridor, essentially from the railroad all the way to Brooks, and that there are adequate facilities that are providing a safe way for people to travel. So that's a lot of me talking about what we've done and what we're hearing. But if this group has any thoughts, I think in August we had anticipated to get some of your feedback on what our priorities should be or your thoughts on how to proceed with this project. I think we're still in a good spot to do that. We haven't had our steering committee meeting yet. We're still working on those designs. So any feedback from this committee, I think, would be certainly not too late or ill-timed for making those adjustments or thinking about how we're approaching this project and prioritizing different design elements. So Ben, did I forget anything?
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah.
Gene has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. A couple things. Obviously, whatever's going to be done with that corridor from Brooks to Broadway, including the hip strip, is going to be servicing the transit of people on whatever devices they're using for the next, 4 or 5 decades. What's the anticipated rise in traffic volumes? That's the first part of my question. And secondly, the possibility of I think of a 4 to 3 conversion, at least on the hip strip, and maybe that other 2 blocks has been talked about. And what, if anything, would that do to changing those traffic volumes?
It's a really good question. I will say that in our analysis, one of the other things that we've been working on with our consultants over the last 2 to 3 months is sort of a traffic analysis, existing conditions, projected volumes, kind of technical memo that we're hoping to have ready in the next couple of weeks. And when you look at volume, and this is going to sort of be a long roundabout way to get to your answer, Gene, but when you look at volumes back even the last 50 or 60 years, they haven't really changed much on the Higgins Bridge. They've been remarkably consistent. That doesn't necessarily mean we aren't seeing an increase in peak hour traffic. It also might mean that, we've had a lot in 2000, the Orange Street Bridge was expanded. That absorbed, I think, a fair amount of traffic coming into downtown. The Madison Street Bridge underwent some improvements, maybe not a capacity expansion, but certainly improvements several years ago. So there are a lot of those different changes that could have absorbed a lot of that growth that might have stayed on Higgins. But what that means for the future is, we know that there's going to be growth and development both downtown, along the hip strip. We have a rezone request coming through the city for the Missoulian property. There's the Reed condos that were approved. We know that there's going to be growth, both residential and commercial, and that has the potential to increase the number of trips that are happening on Higgins. But what that means for traffic depends largely on what kind of transit do we have, what kind of multimodal facilities, and not necessarily how many travel lanes we have. So it's sort of hard to predict what traffic is going to be 20 years from now, when we don't even know what our sort of recommended facilities are going to be. That said, again, there hasn't been a whole lot of growth on Higgins in that amount of, that long 50, 60 year time period. And so we're trying to take a relatively conservative estimate of what future traffic increases might be, and take a multimodal approach to saying, there will be certainly a growth in trips. How much of that can we reasonably absorb in other facilities given different designs? And then that will tell us a lot about what the vehicular traffic might be like. So I think there's not necessarily an easy answer to that, but short answer is we expect there may be some growth in traffic, but really our capacity gains are going to come from multimodal facilities, and that we really need to think not just about vehicle throughput, but circulation and things like the hip strip as a destination. And so I don't know that we need to focus solely on what our projected traffic volumes are going to be.
I would add that, that will certainly be a part of the technical analysis of the designs kind of in the next stage of this process. And also that, as is the case with, all of the Carmageddons that never happened in bigger cities when major construction projects happened, we've seen similarly, with Higgins under construction, there's no, it's not chaos and gridlock everywhere. People are managing just fine. And so I'm confident that with appropriate design and warning, that whatever solution is landed on for Higgins is going to function.
Yeah, and related to that, the last part of your question, Gene, about the 4 to 3 lane conversion, is that could be one of the options that we look at, but we're trying not to go into this with a preconceived, we should do X, Y, or Z improvement. We really want to look at different options and different ways to creatively use that right-of-way space, and try to weigh those trade-offs and select an approach that is going to be the most appropriate in terms of safety and accessibility, and providing room for economic growth for the hip strip and for downtown. So I think in that sense, we could look at it, we'll likely look at something that has a lane reduction, but we will also look at other creative ways to use the existing right-of-way to maintain access, whatever that might look like.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any other hands up or comments that board members would like to make? I'm not seeing any. All right. I think we can
I'd like
move
to
on.
just make a final push for people to monitor the Engage Missoula page and add comments as you'd like. There's all sorts of neat ways to interact there. I know that Aaron mentioned it, but it's it's a great place to stay involved.
Yep. Thanks, Ben.
Okay, Charlie, you're up next.
Hello, y'all. I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right, so I'm here to talk about just a brief tip update or transportation improvement program, as well as focus on congestion mitigation and air quality project nominations that we are going to hopefully be solidifying into a future tip update. So for a quick overview, I'm just going to introduce the MPO, as I know this board is more distant from regional planning and is city focused, as well as what the transportation improvement program is. And then we'll get into our discussion of the CMAC projects. So for those who are unaware, the Missoula Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO for short, exists under federal mandate as areas with a population over 50,000 are required to have a metropolitan planning organization to assist with cross-jurisdictional transportation projects. So the Missoula MPO has existed since 1982, and we exist within Missoula County, but broader than the city of Missoula. So this map on this slide sort of shows our urbanized area, which is where we are able to program the funds, but we consider and analyze the broader area within the county known as the MPO planning area. Our governing body is the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee, and we also have a technical assistance board, the Transportation Technical Advisory Committee. The MPO has some primary efforts, and I think the most important one is developing and updating our long-range transportation plan. So we recently adopted in our TPCC board the 2050 long-range transportation plan. If you haven't checked it out on our website, MissoulaMPO.com, I highly suggest. That was quite an effort, and I think that our consultant team helped us out quite a lot and did a great job with the design of the plan. We also have the urban count program, so we collect bike and pedestrian data, and we manage a transportation model to confirm air quality conformity and understand what our traffic demands are for the region. We also manage our community transportation safety plan, so organizing around how to reduce traffic fatalities and serious injuries in the region. And lastly, we facilitate the production of projects, of transportation projects, as Aaron went over with Higgins specifically, from public engagement to construction. Our sort of organizing document is the Transportation Improvement Program, and it contains our fiscally constrained list of projects that we will be constructing over a set time period, broken down by their different construction phases and engineering phases. And this program also reveals projects and documents projects that are funded and planned around by the Montana Department of Transportation, Mountain Line Transit Agency, and considers and represents funds that are outside of the state, so FHWA, or Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration as well. So we recently adopted the federal fiscal year 2022 to 2026 TIP through our Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee in August. And this update contains some new projects, some updates to the costs of projects that existed in the previous TIP year timeframes, and newly committed funds to later project phases that were committed in the extended fiscal year timeframe of this updated TIP. Something exciting about this TIP is that we have available discretionary funds within the congestion mitigation and air quality funds. So the MPO is able to determine what we want to do with these funds, and that's the topic of the rest of this presentation. So we are planning on creating a CMAQ project selection committee to recommend the final funded projects. These projects we were nominated by local agencies, so the city and county, as well as Mountain Line. We have 9 projects being considered, as well as one that is currently in the TIP without committed funds yet. There's around $5.5 million, and our other discretionary fund, Surface Transportation Program Urban, has all of its available funds committed to the Russell Street project. So those funds are off the board. So we have 10 projects that we're considering committing the around $5.5 million of CMAQ funds to. I'm going to go through and introduce these. They all have around $1 million or less as their estimated CMAQ match. So the first one is Bitterroot Trail Bridge, Clark Fork River, England Boulevard Protected Bike Lanes. Both of those are at $1 million. The Front Main two-way conversion. I'm sure you all have heard about this project. The Higgins Avenue Multimodal Improvements Project, Highway 200 Shared Use Path, the Kent Central Neighborhood Greenway intersections, and this comes out of our long-range transportation plan. Mullen Road Complete Streets Project is our lowest match at just over $500,000. South Avenue Multimodal Improvements and traffic signal optimization. We also have a project that is currently in our TIP with uncommitted funds, and those funds are not determined, and that would be to purchase buses for Mountain Light Transit Systems fleet expansion. So we are currently considering and prioritizing these projects to see what we want to push forward using two methods. We have sort of a strict mathematical way of analyzing many of these projects that was done in the production of our project list in the long range transportation plan update. And then we are also comparing the project qualities with specific measures for the CMAQ projects, as the goal of CMAQ is to mitigate congestion and improve air quality. So these project qualities that we're going to go through with the CMAQ project selection subcommittee are existing and future usage. How could this project improve our mode split, and what would the impact of the project be on general users now and in our 30-year time frame? So equity and how this might improve access to housing, congestion and mitigation and emissions reduction, which is an important consideration for CMAQ, crash reduction in hotspot and crash hotspot reduction. This is just a general goal of the MPO. Multimodal transportation benefits. So this improve connectivity for all roadway users. And then we have secondary criteria that are more so oriented around constructability per se. So is this project ready? Is there any major setbacks that we can see? How ready are the sponsors or the nominators of the project to fund this and contribute to the production of the project? The long-term viability of the emissions reduction impact. So how will this project measure up compared to others in terms of reducing emissions for the region? The scalability. So does this project tie into a larger project or existing network of infrastructure? The regional significance. We are a regional planning body, so we want to make sure that our projects have a benefit for the region at large. Mode split benefits, as mentioned, and then the leverage and investment potential. So does this project have the ability to influence, other agencies to contribute beyond what is currently stated? So we're going to get into just maps and analysis of the project areas. So the list that I just went through, the first one is the Bitterroot Trail Bridge at the Clark Fork River. So this would help connect the Milwaukee Trail to the north side using the existing rail trestle and into the north side trail system. So essentially from the Milwaukee Trail to West Broadway. We have the England Boulevard Protected Bike Lanes. I think this is an important project as there's a gap in bike facilities here, from what I understand, and will be helpful in benefiting connectivity for the Swatupkin development. The Front Main two-way conversion. Many of you all have probably heard about this project, but in general, it's in its initial studying phase, and there's a meeting this Thursday through the Missoula Development Agency, I believe, at the Missoula County Public Library. So it's kicking off, and we'd be committing funds that would match the city's CIP funds to this project. The Higgins Avenue Multimodal Project, as Aaron just introduced. The Bonner Streetcar or Highway 200 shared use path. So this project would be thought of as one section of the larger Highway 200 plan that we have recently adopted and could be considered as a phased approach to completing that project. It would be a shared use path from Tamarack to Staple, which is essentially right at East Missoula. The Kent Central Neighborhood Greenway project, which this emphasizes intersections at Russell. And this is a project that is within our long-range transportation plan, but is not currently being considered as a high priority due to its relatively large cost in comparison to other sort of more easily constructible neighborhood greenway projects. And then the Mullen area complete street or shared use path. So this would include a single side shared use path that would be beneficial in connecting and filling in a gap that is not going to be funded through the build grant for the rest of the Mullen Road projects, and would be highly beneficial for connectivity of the Swatupkin development that's to occur in the near future. Another project is our South Avenue Multimodal Improvements Project. So this is a project that exists and has committed funds on the city CIP. There has been a 60% design done through the city engineering group, which helps sort out a lot of the right-of-way challenges that exist around Community Medical Center towards the east side of that project near South Reserve Street. And this project has been submitted multiple times through the state's Transportation Alternatives Grant Program, including this past year. And just having extra funding for a project that seems to be like it's more expensive than what the city CIP can commit to it would be beneficial for getting this project constructed. The traffic signal optimization, this is not necessarily a project per se, but it exists as a program in the long-range transportation plan update. And this would be to look at our traffic signals and see how we can improve them, not only for safety, but generalized traffic flow. I think a lot of cities and regions are beginning to understand that you can improve traffic not only by widening roads, which seems to be physically unsustainable, but by improving your traffic signals, their general operations and how they link together through intelligent transportation systems, which are emerging as of recently. And then the last, as discussed, is the Mountain Line bus fleet expansion, which we do not have a determined committed amount of funds, but this is on the tip without any committed funds to the project. Here, I think, is a great place to sort of introduce conversation. If anybody has questions, we have a table that shows the ranked order of the projects using the LRTP scoring. So the ones with specific numbers. So the highest ranked is at the top of the table. The lowest ranked is at the bottom. And then we have on the other side, the ranked CMAQ using the CMAQ criteria. And these do not have particular numbers, but from our initial review is how we see them prioritized. So if anybody has any questions on the project specifics or sees things that they would like to add or what they see as a priority, this is a great sort of slide to kick that conversation off with.
All right, guys, this is when we all should, give our feedback. This is your opportunity. I agree with the CMAQ criteria. I was just doing my notes. I think the Bitterroot Trail connecting the north side is an amazing project because it connects the neighborhood to, big trail system and gives access. The Front Main two-way conversion has been in discussion, and you could probably speak specifically to all the different advantages it has. But Higgins Avenue one, I think we all agree, is a high priority. I see the shared use path going on Highway 200 as really, really important. So I'm really glad to see that it moved up in the ratings, because if the Highway 200 projects were to, get funded, I think that shared use path piece of it, as you were saying, like a phased approach is super important, because there's a shared use path that goes farther east and then would be part of that. So I'm happy to see that as being up there. I'm also really, really happy to see the Mullen Road shared use path, because we've discussed how people feel really unsafe because the shared use path ends and then they do not feel comfortable joining the road and then having that reserve intersection there. So I think that one is also super important. So I'm glad to see it is moved up in the ratings. South Avenue, we've discussed at length. I think it needs new facilities, and if we can help get there, that's great. I guess the England Boulevard one was my question mark. I would be interested to hear your thoughts about that, and maybe the two-way conversion, just so we understand better.
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about those a little bit more and provide a little more context on those projects. The England Boulevard one is a fairly new project, meaning this was the first LRTP that I think it's existed in. And the reason is because really we see this as our northern connection to the Swatipcane area. All of these roads where we got the build grant, where we're putting all this federal money into connecting Mary Jane Boulevard to Broadway and Mullen, connecting George Elmer, and then connecting England Boulevard on the east-west. Those are all going to have main streets are all going to have really high quality bike ped facilities, including protected bike lanes. And so to really maximize that investment, we need the people who are going to be living in these developments, not only to be able to travel within their development, but to get into town. And if we connect England Boulevard from Great Northern on the east to the new section, where it's going to be built to the west, we're going to have then kind of high quality bike lanes all the way from west of town. You could get to Great Northern, head south, and then get on bike lanes on Palmer, and then you have wide shoulder on Broadway. And again, there are projects in the LRTP to add buffered bike lanes to Broadway. So the thought is that you would be able to get right to downtown from the northern part of all those developments. In some ways, could be a quicker or better safer connection than maybe even the Mullen Road Complete Street provides, but accomplishing kind of those same goals of feeding those neighborhoods that we're planning for into the center of town. As for the two-way conversion, there's several reasons why it scores well. One is that it provides better facilities for people outside of vehicles, but it also, again, because of the congestion mitigation air quality benefits, when you go from two-way to one, or when you go from one-way to two-way, you reduce the vehicle miles traveled that those roads create, because people aren't circling the blocks looking for parking, or if they miss their destination, they're not going further around the block to deal with it. And so the modeling there from the original feasibility study showed that it really reduced the amount of time that people spend idling or driving around downtown. And so that's where that gets a lot of its benefit from. But again, also just by providing more space for more users, it provides a lot of benefit that way as well.
Thanks.
One thing
I
that
understand. I think I understand that way better. So I thought that was very nicely done.
Okay. one thing that Charlie mentioned, but I just want to reiterate, is that there's about $5.5 million available. That number always seems to get smaller. And then these 9 projects are not all fundable with that $5.5 million. And so, as you pointed out, Jesse, I think there's a lot of need. These are kind of, we put some heads together to say, all of the projects that we have, what might we consider nominating? We wanted to put forward a list that was more than the available funding so that we could go through this process of doing a little bit of that analysis and finding out what is the biggest bang for our buck with this funding source. And so we're going to, Charlie mentioned a committee that's going to be city and county staff and MPO staff, really kind of kicking the tires on all of these and going through those scoring criteria and assigning values to them. And this will eventually, whatever gets recommended for funding will go through a public process through TTAC and TPCC. My guess is that timing won't quite align with Bike Ped Board, but we will certainly keep you posted as to when those meetings happen. But I guess what we're looking for as staff, it would be kind of general head nods that we're in the right ballpark here, and then even more, if there are certain projects that you would recommend over others, then that would certainly play into some of those discussions that we have at a staff level. But we're also just figuring out, the tip has been in the kind of enabling legislation for the Bike Ped Board for a while, and this is the first time we've ever brought it here, I think. So thank you for weighing in on it. But if you see other ways to be involved, or if there's more information that you think that you need, then maybe we can do better next year. But for now, this is what we see as kind of a good process for getting feedback from you guys on this.
And Ben, just to revisit, this is just through 2026. So for example, all of the neighborhood development that is west, around England Boulevard area is going to continue for many, many years. And so this process will be redone after the 2026. And so even though a project isn't funded right now for that time period, it could be funded later, right?
This process is done every year, and it looks 5 years out. So next year will be 23 through 27. And the year after that will be 24 through 28. And so we're just looking at the next 5 years of available funding, but we adopt a tip every year.
I see. Okay. All right. So board members, if you could weigh in and tell your favorite. Gene has his hand up. Go ahead, Gene.
Yeah, just to mention on the couple things, excuse me, the South Avenue improvements, just from seeing the map, and I try to get a good look at it, I don't know that we need to have it up again, but that red line went from Reserve westward, and it went past from what I could see, went past the roundabout where you enter the Fort Missoula recreation area. Right now, there's already on the south side of South Avenue, there's already what I would refer to as a multi-use path already going along, and that goes all the way out to, almost all the way out to the river on South Avenue, to Clements at least. So I'm wondering why that red line showed going past the fort entrance there. And then the other thing is the Highway 200 shared use path. That didn't obviously include the decisions to whatever we're going to be doing between the west end of East Missoula before you go under the highway. Getting back to Van Buren Street, in terms of whether it's going to be a shared use path along the north side of the freeway, or putting in protected bike lanes, on the road that's already there, 200 coming in to become Broadway. So I agree that that should be relatively low on the list until we take care of the portion of accommodating bicycling and other multimodal aspects, personal vehicles for the section that's closer to town. So those are just the two observations and comments, if it made any sense.
Thanks, Gene. I heard a question in there about South Avenue and why does the red line go further west than the roundabout? The roundabout is one entrance to the fort. There is another entrance at 36th, which is where the improvements will go to. That is currently the end of the city limit. For the city owns the right of way for South Avenue to 36th, and so we're planning out to that. Which is kind of the west end of Fort Missoula Regional Park. The roundabout is kind of in the middle.
Okay.
And then as
there,
what's that?
I said from that roundabout that's east of Big Sky High School, there's already a pathway that goes along the south side, south of South Avenue. It goes from that first roundabout, which is I think off of Tower Street. It goes all the way out to Clements. It's not, I mean, there's not a lot to it, but it's there. So I was just trying to figure out if that's going to be incorporated and improved or if it's, you know, what the deal is.
Yep, connections to it would be improved, especially at cross streets. There would likely be sidewalk on the north side of the street, and there would be a westbound bike lane added, on-street bike lane for westbound traffic because the shared use path is only on the south side of the street. And while sure it's bi-directional, it might not be easy for everyone or desirable for people to cross South Avenue just to use that facility and then maybe have to cross South Avenue again to get there to their destination on the north, such as Big Sky High School.
Got it.
Right, because the two schools are on the north side. So you have Big Sky High School in the north and then Russell, right? No, not Russell. What's the other one? CS Porter. CS Porter is also on the north side. So you have a lot of children flowing out of the north side who would benefit from facilities on the north side of that street. Jessica has her hand up.
Just as far as head nods and whether you're on the right track, I think having gone through the process of the LRTP, the Citizens Advisory Committee, I do trust these scores. I think that a lot of thought was put into bike and pedestrian concerns and how those factored in. And I think that they were really heavily weighed. So I feel good about that. And all of these projects, I feel like have run into conversations about them over the last few years. And I think I find it really hard to prioritize because they all would do a lot toward making the network more complete. So I think that's great. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with. And then I was curious about the traffic signal optimization and how comprehensive that would be and whether it would include state routes like Orange and Higgins and what that would mean.
Aaron, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that one. My goal would be that it would include all the routes in Missoula, and that this is a project that would require partnership with the state DOT. And so we need to continue to have conversations with them about what that means and what that looks like. But coming to the table with funding always helps make things happen faster. So yes, I think in order to really reap all the benefits of this, we would want to be looking at all of the routes and all of the signals in the urban area, including streets like Reserve and Brooks and those sort of most challenging streets, especially if we want to get the full benefit of what something like traffic signal optimization or implementing some increased amount of new technology into our traffic signal system that would be the goal.
And it's certainly a frequent comment on social media of why can't Missoula just time the signals, and that'll improve a lot. And it's been studied a little bit, and there are certainly benefits to be gained, but there's also trade-offs. If you prioritize the main roads, it can come at the detriment of side streets and turning movements, which can then lead to people shooting gaps that they might not have and can lead to safety concerns. It can also contribute to a pedestrian unfriendly environment if you have to wait for a long time at signals. And so there's a lot of kind of competing interest or balancing needs that needs to happen with a signal timing project. And it's one that I know I got very excited about. Aaron and I went to a training in Portland, and we spent a chunk of it looking at the timing that they had done in their downtown. They called it the green wave for biking, where they designed all of their lights so that if you're a bike rider, you hit them at 14 miles an hour and you get all the greens for like over a mile. But the kind of fine print on that was that those are one-way streets, and so they're easily able to time them for inbound in the morning and then outbound in the afternoon. And we don't have the same kind of traffic patterns and street configurations that they do to do something like that. So there's certainly a lot of benefit to a signal timing project, but quantifying it within the context of kind of all those other criteria that Charlie went over, it's harder to see how that scores well. That being said, I would not be surprised if that one emerges as being funded, just because there is a lot of, especially from a congestion mitigation perspective, there is a lot of benefit to that.
Thanks.
All right, great comments. Anyone else want to weigh in? I think overall, my sense is that the board has seen a lot of these projects and discussed them already, and we feel like you're on the right track. But if anyone would like to weigh in, please raise your hand. This is your chance. Oh, wait. Britt,
This is
go
Britt.
for it.
I think I tried to raise my hand, and I just want to let everybody know that I had to drop off the video portion, so my name's going to disappear, but I'm still here. I'm on the phone.
Okay, no worries. Thanks for letting us know.
And I just want to echo what everyone else said. And then also additionally, I really like the Bitterroot Trail Bridge. I think that's the kind of symbolic thing that I think exceeds its actual point value. So I guess that's what I would say there.
Thanks, Britt.
Thank you. All right, anyone else want to weigh in? Okay, well, I think from my perspective, we seem to be in agreement that you're on the right track and we like the project rankings. Aaron or Charles, what would you like? Any other specific action from this board that would support you?
I don't think so, unless you wanted to make a formal recommendation, but we can also come back, as we go through TTAC and TPCC process, because I don't expect that'll be for another couple of months as we sort of work through on the work group level.
Okay, well, I would just say you should direct it, whatever is most helpful to you.
Perfect.
Process-wise, the tip is going to be approved by TTAC and TPCC with an understanding that there's going to be an amendment for whatever comes forward for the CMAQ recommendation. That was kind of our last, at least that was the guidance that I remembered from TTAC last. Are you in agreement with that, Aaron?
Yeah, and in fact, I would say not that it will be, but that it was adopted in August. It still has to go through MDT and FHWA approval, but we left sort of the CMAQ funding as a to be determined, and that there will be an amendment to the tip coming up sometime once we actually get to the point. That's essentially how the recommendations for funding get formalized into an actual, these are being funded. and there's a whole lot of process with that, and depending on projects and coordination with MDT for projects that might be in their routes. There's a whole lot of details kind of behind the scenes on that. But yes, short answer, the tip was approved by TPCC, sort of leaving the CMAQ funding aside for now until we have a more formal recommendation on projects. And some additional just work at the staff level to determine which of these we really need to move forward.
So at this point, would you like me to prepare a document that the board could vote on and approve next meeting that says that we support the projects as ranked by CMAQ criteria? Would that be helpful?
You know, I think if there are specific projects that this board really feels like we should elevate and fund, I think that is, and sort of the rationale behind that, I think that is helpful. If you trust our process, or, want to defer to our process and sort of see what rises to the top and then comment on that, we could also take that approach. So we could come back once we have recommendations out of that subcommittee, say, here's what we're proposing to bring forward, here's what staff is recommending funding, and then you could comment on that as sort of an official action at a future board meeting. That also would be totally appropriate. I guess I would leave it up to you, which you feel like is most helpful or best reflects your input on the process.
All right, with that, I agree with Jessica in that they all seem really worthwhile, and there's pros and cons for all of them. And so I feel like it would be comfortable for me if we waited and you came back with what the committee's specific recommendations are, and then we might weigh in with your even more honed down list. Does anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think, Jessica, just a quick thought on that. I think that makes sense too, from the perspective of we would have more detail on why we would be recommending those projects, because some of them may relate to, there just may be feasibility issues with MDT or constructability that we hadn't thought about, or just other details that we would have ironed out, and then we could present those along with our recommendations. So there will just be a more detailed set of responses from, or part of the recommendations from staff.
All right, that sounds good. Britt, did you want to comment? Your hand's up.
Sorry, that was an accident. I didn't mean to put my hand up. Sorry.
That's okay. No worries. All right, if I'm not seeing any other hands up, so we'll, I think if everyone is all right, we'll go ahead and move on to other bike and pedestrian program updates from Ben Weiss.
Thanks. So the last couple months, really last month has been really busy with implementation of the projects from the maintenance list that we discussed in the spring. We've seen bike lanes added on Door Lane, on North Russell. There are buffered bike lanes. High Park Way, there's a bike lane in the uphill direction and a Sharrow in the downhill direction. And oh gee, I feel like there's another big one, another kind of key connection that I'm drawing a blank on right now. The only one that I know that we did not follow the board's recommendation on was the South 3rd Street West between Cottonwood and Orange. I think the board wanted us to look at parking removal and adding bike lanes there, and we kind of, with all the other ones that we had going on, with all the other stuff happening this summer, we didn't feel like we could do that justice and get that done. And without bike lanes on Orange Street or on 3rd east of Orange, we didn't think that connection was imperative to make at this time. And so we deferred. Britt, I know that one's in your neighborhood, and I know that's one that you've been fighting for a while, but it just we couldn't make it happen this time around. And so that's still on the list. I think that it's certainly possible that by next year, the existing striping will be worn away and we could revisit, because, excuse me, because the fresh chip seal is, it's always hard to get paint to stick to it. But for now, that's kind of where we're at with it, with that one. In that same neighborhood, we did see the implementation of the third Myrtle bulb outs, the traffic calming project that that happened by Bernice's and Meadow Sweet, Viability. And so thanks to Jessica Goodburn for writing that grant. We've seen most of the elements installed. The bike racks are have been a little delayed, and then the ramp that we got for the Bernice's side didn't fit, and so we're getting a new one to add there. And so we're still a little ways out, but we're receiving mixed reviews, I would say. There's certainly some complaints about the absent parking spaces, but there's a lot of positive feedback about making the space feel alive, vibrant, artistic, people-centered instead of vehicle-centered, all of the reasons that we do the things that we do. And just a reminder that those parking spaces that disappeared were they were within 20 feet of the crosswalk, and so those are technically prohibited by federal, state, and local laws. And so while they do represent lost parking in the sense that people had been using them, they were never legal spaces to begin with. And so there was certainly some crash history there. And there was a certain amount that was unreported. I've heard of 3 people that since they learned about this project, they said, "Oh, thank goodness this is happening. I got hit there on my bike 15 years ago and never reported it because I was able to walk away." And so there's certainly, I've heard of drivers too, again, property damage crashes where people choose not to report them because of how tight that was in there. James helped add planters. It really was it's a cool project that's not quite done. If people haven't checked it out, please do. And please show your support for the businesses in the neighborhood that came together when kind of faced with the news that they'd be losing those parking spots. They made, lemonade out of the lemons and helped put a really beautiful project together. And so we're really excited about that. Hopefully it will become a model that we can follow in other parts of town. Sunday Streets happened in August, and in the Franklin of the Fort neighborhood, and I got there from thinking about traffic calming projects and kind of examples for other parts of town. There are circles over there that have nice big planters in them. There's other circles that have been painted. The neighborhood over there is really taking some ownership of the traffic calming features, and it's great to see. While, in the interim, just a week or two ago, a friend of mine who's an artist in New York was commissioned to paint in a pedestrian bulb out area. And so I got all sorts of information from him about what the process looked like from the city side and how he was commissioned to do that. And, we don't have New York money yet for this sort of thing, but I certainly learned a lot and hopefully have some better information to help neighbors, help people like James who want to be contributing to these spots, give them some more guidance on how we can do that kind of safely and effectively. So we really look forward to that. The other thing that's been keeping me busy are the planning projects that we have underway. Aaron talked about Higgins, and then as came through the CIP process, I've been working with engineering staff to start on the Eaton Street sidewalks project, the North 5th Warden and Turner sidewalk project, the Ivy Franklin sidewalk project, and then the West Side Area Mobility project. Those are all kind of moving forward in the design phase. We'll have something to share to the board on. I bet Eaton will be the first one that the board gets to see, some actual lines on a map, maybe as soon as next month. And so we'll get some feedback on that. I will give a presentation and kind of explain why we're showing what we're showing, but it'll be early enough in the process that we'll certainly be able to take some feedback. Jesse asked about bike-friendly community. I had a conversation with the league a couple weeks ago. They are doing their benchmarking reports where they kind of look at communities and how well they're doing and what's improving. We were part of their 2014, I think their 2014, 2016, and 2018 reports. I don't think they did one last year. And so they reached out and wanted a copy of our 2010 bike map and our 2020 bike map to see what's changed. They wanted to then follow up with a phone conversation and talk about how we monitor things, how we measure success, any particular projects that we're really proud of. And it led to a really great conversation about how how outside organizations help communities by kind of comparing us against each other and what is actually a useful metric. And so this relates to the bike friendly community discussion in that they're in the process of totally revamping what that program looks like, or at least what the application looks like. And so they have kind of invited us to be beta testers for their new development. And so we don't have we didn't submit this go around for renewal. They're just keeping us at the same level, and they've invited us to be again, help them figure out what exactly is a useful statistic. Knowing that we have 50 miles of bike lanes, what does that actually tell either a resident here or someone somewhere else about what biking in Missoula is like? It's certainly arguable that it signifies that we make an investment in it, but it doesn't really tell you how good that works for people. And so they're really trying to develop criteria that get at how useful is the system, how comfortable do people feel on it, and how easy is it to make the choice to bike or walk for transportation purposes. And so I was thrilled that they asked us to be part of helping beta test that, because after riding in other places like Portland and Fort Collins and Seattle and New York, these places that are considered good bike cities, I still find it easier to ride here than just about anywhere else that I've ever ridden. And so I look forward to the chance to help create a metric that really helps identify that. But I also mentioned that this could be a good project for our Bike Ped Advisory Board, because one of the things the league does is help communities. They help nonprofits, they help bike ped boards. And so I said this could be a good project for them to help with, and they agreed wholeheartedly. And so, Jesse, when I hear more from them about what that looks like and what they're going to kick off, I'm going to share that with you immediately so that you or a designated representative from the board can help be part of that process.
I think that's very exciting.
I'm sure there's other stuff that I'm not thinking of, but I feel like that's in the interest of time. If there's any questions about those projects, I'd be happy to take them, but I might just consider moving on. Jean, I did get your email about education needs, and I'm glad you brought it up again. And it's something that I've shared with Catherine, and we're starting to, get a list and all of the actual content together that we can.
Great, thanks, Ben.
All right. Well, if no
sorry,
one has any other
I do have
questions.
one more thing, and this is something that I hope to share an actual presentation on next month also. But we've been in the process of developing a school zone policy. This came after a city council recommendation following our presentation on the neighborhood traffic management program, when we told them that we didn't have the statutory authority to reduce speed limits blanketly across the city. They said, well, we have the right to do them in school zones, right? Why don't we develop a policy and look at doing some sort of uniform school zone application? So I've been researching school zone policies in other communities. I found a great one in Charlotte, North Carolina that was pretty succinct. And so I modeled mine after theirs. We are going through kind of an internal process right now, making sure that A, that we agree with it from an engineering perspective, engineering and planning perspective. B, that it meets the legal threshold that we want. C, that it's reasonable. We can actually accomplish it in a reasonable amount of time. Like, how much updating to signage and striping are we actually asking for with this policy? And once we feel good about this internally, we're going to go and share it. That's when I would bring it to the Bike Ped Board, and when I would bring it to the school districts and get some feedback from them on it. And then we would bring to council following that. And so I look forward to having more to share in October.
That sounds great. It sounds like a project that we need and we can find a solution for. So that's really exciting. All right. Anybody else? Britt, your phantom hand's still up. If you want to speak, feel free to unmute yourself at any time. Otherwise.
Yeah, I don't know why my hand is still up. I have no idea, but I'm okay for now.
That's
Okay.
funny. I don't see a phantom hand. I remembered the other bike lane project, and that's Rattlesnake Drive. We completed the bike lanes all the way up to Creek Crossing from where they had previously ended just north of Missoula Ave. And so that included removal of the bulb out by the school. But the trade-off there is we added a rapid flashing beacon, hopefully making pedestrian crossings just as safe or safer than they were with the bulb out that was there previously.
I think that's a great project because the bikers are also safer. So that's awesome. All right, new business is next. We're going to discuss changing the date and time that this board meets. We sort of had a casual conversation about it in August, and then Ben had sent me an email about a time that worked best for the city staff. And so I'll let Ben revisit that and then we can have discussion.
Yeah, so I certainly, we kicked it around a little bit, and there's nothing that says that we have to meet during the day. We're seemingly having a recruitment and retention issue with our current time, and I'd certainly entertain changing the time. I think that we are looking at the Monday evenings is really the only evening that I'm available. And so we were looking at the second Monday, I believe, of the month being the one that we look for. One of the things that we do feel like we should point out is that a 6 to 8 time would overlap with city council meeting. And so if board members are wanting to attend city council meeting, that might be challenging.
Okay. So last time everyone sort of informally said 6 to 8 works for me, but I don't think we brought up the city council conflict. So if that's an issue for anyone personally, please let us know. Okay. It doesn't seem like that's a problem for anybody. So second Monday of every month from 6 to 8 p.m. we'll meet as a board, and that will allow, for example, Kip to participate in the board. And so that's going to keep Kip from having to resign because of work obligations. And so he's the second board member who's said, because of work conflicts, I need it to be later. And I just feel like it's more realistic for people to have a later start. And so I feel I'm totally in support of it. Do we need to have a motion, Ben, for this, or since it's just for us?
Hey, Jess, can I jump in? I was just emailing with Kip and he requested if we could do 6:15 to give him a chance to be on time.
I'm fine with whatever. I mean, that's as far as city staff are fine with that. If you get off at 6, that would make sense, right? So I'm sure he's not alone in that.
Yeah, and that's something we can do. I guess I certainly would want to honor we have a quorum, and I want to honor the votes of people here, but I also want to make sure that we're not creating problems for anybody from people that we haven't heard from. And so maybe we should take the vote on like a conditional approval that if Bella and I reach out directly to the other members to make sure that they're supportive, that we won't actually, we'll let you know the results of that outreach.
I think that's fine. If somebody wants to make a conditional motion based on that outreach, that we approve a change in meeting time to the second Monday of the month from 6:15 to 8:15, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll move that, Jesse, but I don't know, are we bound to a 2-hour time slot? I mean, I think in many cases we can get a lot of things done. Apparently we seem to be right now, even with all the input from agencies, we're at about an hour and a half. So I see no reason why we would, if we're starting at 6:15, when we have to go to 8:15, I think it could be, 8 o'clock or maybe even 7:45. I don't know that we have to, or maybe we do have to tie ourselves to 2 hours, but I personally see no reason to do that.
I mean, I feel like if we can get the work done in the amount of time it takes, if it's less than that, then, that's great. So anyone else have any thoughts about that? All right.
No, in fact, it's easier for me to, I know that we don't always like going longer, but it's easier for me to contemplate going longer at an evening time than it is a 3 to 5 time.
Okay. Yeah, I think we keep it at 2 hours, and if we don't need that time, then we'll just, wrap it up early.
I was gonna say schedule at 6:15 to 8, and then I'll keep in my mind that I would be available till 8:30. That would be no problem. On an as needed, that would be no problem for me.
Okay. Does that sound good to everybody else? Nod heads. Okay. All right. It seems like it's going to be good. So Jean, if you don't mind, can you say your formal motion again?
Yeah, I make a motion that we move the times for the board meetings to the second Monday of the month from 6:15 p.m. till 8 p.m. Unless there is some conflicting aspects coming from current board members that make that difficult and would result in them having to resign from the board.
All right. How about a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, James. So all in favor? Say aye. All right. Looks like we are all in agreement that that's going to be a change. So that's exciting.
Did we hear from Britt? Britt, does that work for you?
Yes, that works fine for me. I second and vote yes for all of that.
Great, thanks.
All right. The next item on the agenda is officer nominations and board member terms. Board members Eugene Schmitz and Jessica Doherty Goodburn terms are set to end September 30th, 2021. And so I guess at this point, we just want to make sure that you all are interested in being renominated.
You don't even have to tell us. Just you need to let the mayor's office. If you want to stay on, you need to let the mayor's office know by the end of the month, or else those positions will go into vacancy.
I responded to Heidi that I'm interested in continuing. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, myself as well. But I'll try to get something into the mayor's office, I guess, via email or whatever.
Yeah, just email Heidi Bakula, and you should have emails from her. She'll take care of it.
All right, great. Thanks, guys. The next thing is a discussion on bike dismount areas. And this came out of some of my travels around, particularly to Fargo. They have an area that's very similar to our downtown, and it's very congested with pedestrians and bikes. And they have bike dismount imagery on the actual sidewalk pavement, and then as well as on other signs. You can see it attached if you guys click on your click on the little attachment link. But it seemed to me like a nice compromise between everyone can ride their bicycle everywhere on the sidewalk and being mindful of pedestrian safety with multiple, users of multiple abilities and ages. And I was interested to get you guys' opinions about having a bike dismount area. And often it was just a block or two, just in the very most congested part. But also if it would require the city council to pass something allowing it. So what do you guys think about having a bike dismount area? I'm particularly thinking, between, the bridge and Broadway. I mean, at times it is just a super congested area, but I mean, there are others, obviously. What do you guys think?
So I just want to give a little bit of Can I give a little bit of background on
Sure.
previous
Yeah.
city level discussions about this? We've always come back to there being some desire for it. We get requests from the Downtown Association for it. But what we hear from the attorney's office is that because state law allows riding on sidewalks, we can't prohibit it. We could put up signs as an educational tool and they might have some value, but then the question comes down as to who pays for them and how effective will they be versus the sign clutter that they would create. I like the idea of pavement markings more than signs myself, and Fort Collins even has a pretty attractive one that I will email the group. So I think that it's something that could certainly be entertained about it, just because Chad's budget is already stretched thin. I don't know where the funding would come from, and it certainly under current state law would not be an enforceable sign in any way that would lead to a ticket or stopping by a police officer.
So potentially, because the Downtown Association has asked for it in the past, they might be, I know they support various projects. And so that might be something they would be interested in doing, because it doesn't sound like from the traffic police perspective that they're doing a lot of ticketing bike riders, period, for any reason. And that's not even helpful. You sent us the link that says that doesn't really, but people, maybe makes you think twice about your speeds or something like that. Let's see, James, I saw your hand up first. Go ahead.
Actually, I think Jean had a hand up.
Go ahead, Gene.
Okay, just real quick. Yeah, I think in terms of trying to dealing with the state law saying bikes can ride on the sidewalks, I think a program, whether it's sidewalk markings, whatever, just encouraging people with a simple message of please ride at pedestrian speeds, and I think that should hopefully produce good results. The other thing is, if somebody's walking their bike, that makes them basically two people wide, and that in and of itself can add to congestion on sidewalks in some areas. So I think if we can just get the cyclists, hopefully they have good control, riding at about 4 or 5 miles an hour, just to encourage them to, think like a pedestrian and go at pedestrian speeds when you're on a sidewalk in downtown.
Thanks, Gene. Go ahead, James.
Just beside the maybe the legal complications, it also creating an ordinance or some sort of penalty for enforcement could disproportionately affect members of our community that may have difficulty paying for that penalty. It seems like it could cause as much harm as it could good. I know the retailers, business owners who might be more well established in the community would like to see safer sidewalks and a safer, more walkable community. But we also have to look out for some of the other members of the community as well.
Thanks, James. Those are great points. Go ahead, Jessica. I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wonder, what Ben was saying about sign clutter is interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but if the concern is coming from businesses, or I know that this came up at the hip strip or the Higgins corridor meeting, that it can get congested with people walking their bikes. So I don't know if it's coming from business owners or from people walking who are concerned, but what about just like a pretty sign that people put in their shop windows or something like that, just to kind of make it more, because I think if we're not enforcing it and that's off the table, then it's like, okay, well, what is our purpose doing this? And is it to have a sidewalk that's welcoming to everybody, you know, so if kids can feel safe riding on the sidewalk versus in the streets, and people who maybe have different ideas about how to use the sidewalk or whatever, but that it's welcoming for everyone, then maybe having something that the shops are putting up that's like, use the sidewalk, this is great, but just think about other people. I'm also fine with or open to the idea of on the street. I think that's more welcoming than a sign that feels more like an ordinance, but yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Jessica. That's great to think about. I think having just an awareness of it, increasing the awareness is what's really important. It's just that the speed is the problem, in my opinion. It's just knowing that you need to slow down and that there's, you know, a lot of different styles of bicycling on the sidewalk. It might be kids, it might be, you know, and so just not going fast. Britt, did you have a comment? Okay. All right.
Just wanted to make mention quick, you know, this applies to other micro modalities. I mean, the people on powered scooters and skateboards, and, you know, we're seeing a lot more of those around too. So I think just the process of saying, you know, giving a community feel to say, hey, you're on the sidewalk, let's all be at walking speeds for everybody's safety, et cetera, is the way to go. And it doesn't even need to be specific to bicycles, but anybody that's not on foot, it could be a skateboard, it could be a scooter, et cetera.
That's a good point. So slow your roll would be good, because there are a lot of people who are on skateboards that go really fast and on electric scooters that are going really fast. Okay, James, did you have a follow-up?
I was just gonna basically second that. And I like the image that Ben shared in the email that showed the different modality. You could probably only fit so much in one image, but simply showing the skateboard along with the bike infers that it applies to all users as a suggestion.
Yeah, I like it too. I just looked at it on my email. I think that's pretty awesome. I know that it has to be funded, but if you could give us some direction, Ben, if that's something that we could engage with the downtown association with, or what the direction might be.
Yeah, I think that would certainly be a place it would be worth reaching out to Linda McCarthy with the Downtown Association and seeing if, and the BID, I guess the Downtown Partnership, the BID might be the agency that is more the Business Improvement District. That is something that property owners all pay into to kind of keep the area beautiful and functional and inclusive. And so seeing if that's something that they would be interested in, and seeing if they want to, you know, put something like that forward, and working with the city to establish locations where those signs would go. Again, it's not, every time we've discussed it internally, it's been like, well, who do we really need to do this, and what is the benefit? And it's always stalled out at, well, who's going to do the work to figure out exactly where they're going to go and how we're going to pay for these. And so I don't know, I don't have any more answers to those questions, but certainly communicating with the BID and seeing if it's something that they would be interested in moving forward would kind of help move us a little bit.
Okay, I'll reach out to them and we'll see what they say. All right, the next thing, action item, is recommendation to increase Office of Neighborhoods funding for traffic calming and other placemaking initiatives. And so this is an attachment. You can see it's a letter to council just saying that we support the work of the Office of Neighborhoods for the benefit of bikers and pedestrians through their traffic calming, through the neighborhood grants, and saying that we support their funding being increased. And so basically, we just need a motion to approve that letter of support for increasing the funding, and then a second, and then we will send it off. Although council's budget season is wrapped up, this is still something that they can keep in mind moving forward in the future. So do we have any discussion about the item before we make a motion? I don't see any. So I just need a motion.
I'll motion to approve the letter.
Thank you, Jessica. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Jean. All those in favor, you want to wave your hands? Aye. And then
Aye.
Britt. Thank you. Okay,
I'm voting yes.
thank you. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I'll send that to Ben, the City Council, and Mayor Ingen. Should get that letter. Is that correct? Anybody else?
I would send it to Colin Woodrow with the Office of Neighborhoods.
Okay. I will do that. Okay. Let's see. It looks like now we're into the realm of announcements. And so volunteering for fall bicycle and pedestrian counts.
This was on the agenda, but the counts are scheduled. They're a little bit later in the year this year, I think, with some uncertainty around COVID and some of the other events happening. But counts, volunteer counts are taking place Saturday, September 18th from noon to 2, and Tuesday, September 21st from 4 to 6. I know a lot of you have volunteered in the past, and we're looking for volunteers again this year. For those who maybe aren't familiar, we do counts in May and September on a Tuesday and Saturday at kind of the peak times. We've been doing these since 2010, and with the exception of last year, we've done them every, twice a year for over 10 years. And so we're starting to see trends in kind of the locations that we count. It's something that I think the last major report that was done was maybe back in 2018, but that was presented to this board by an MPO staff member, and maybe we'll get another report after these counts are done. So sometime in the winter, heading into next spring's counts, maybe there'll be a more formal report. But yeah, these counts are at a series of locations, intersections typically around town, and you count anyone who just walks or bikes by you on the screen line that you're assigned. If you're at all interested, get in touch with, the sign up form is on the agenda. You can copy and paste that into your browser. Or if you have follow-up questions, you can let me know and I'll forward them on to the appropriate person. I think it's Charlie who's leading it, but it might be someone else in the MPO office.
All right, I did it last time. It was pretty fun, actually. I don't know. It's kind of amazing to learn where people are biking and walking in our town when you maybe not necessarily have been hanging out there. I just wanted to move my calendar forward to give you guys the date for the next meeting, because it is going to be different and new. So if you guys could all, wherever you keep your to-dos, the second Monday in October is on the 11th. And so we're going to be meeting October 11th, and we're going to be meeting from 6:15 to 8. So we make sure we all get that in our little notes. Okay. Anyone else have any other announcements? All right. Nice job, guys. It's always great to see you all. I hope you have a great September, and hopefully we get our nice cool weather and clear skies soon.
Thanks,
I guess
Jesse.
that's it. Okay, take care. We'll adjourn the meeting at 4:44. Thanks. Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.